Maya Sterling tugged at the leash, but the 90-pound German Shepherd didn't just resist. He anchored himself to the concrete floor of the shelter like he was guarding a crime scene. His eyes weren't on the exit. They were fixed on the shadow of a black SUV idling in the parking lot, the same SUV that had followed Maya for 3 towns. Shadow wasn't a pet. He was a silent warning that Maya's past had finally caught up to her. If you believe loyalty is the ultimate shield, hit subscribe now. Watch until the end, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, so I can see our community grow. Come on, Shadow. It's a 3-hour drive and the heater in my car is temperamental at best. Maya Sterling muttered, her voice echoing in the sterile, hollow hallway of the High Plains Rescue Center. She adjusted the collar of her tactical jacket, the fabric rasping against her skin. The dog didn't move. Shadow, a massive German Shepherd with fur the color of charcoal and burnt amber, sat perfectly still. His ears weren't back in fear. They were forward, swiveling like radar dishes. His gaze was locked on the reinforced glass of the lobby doors. "Is he always this stubborn?" Maya asked, looking back at the shelter manager, a weary man named Elias, who looked like he hadn't slept since the mid-90s. "He's not stubborn, Agent Sterling," Elias replied, his voice low. "He's waiting. That dog has been in this facility for 3 months, and he hasn't moved from that spot for anyone. Not the volunteers, not the vets. You're the first person he let put a leash on him. But he knows something you don't." Maya felt a familiar prickle at the base of her neck, the same instinct that had kept her alive during 6 years of undercover work. She looked at the dog, then followed his line of sight. Outside, the Colorado wind was whipping snow into white veils across the parking lot. A single black SUV sat near the entrance, its engine running, exhaust curling into the air like a ghost. "Shadow, let's go," Maya said, her tone shifting from casual to a low, authoritative command. She felt the weight of her sidearm beneath her jacket. It was supposed to be a day off, a day to heal, a day to find a companion to fill the silence of her empty cabin. Shadow finally stood, but he didn't head for the door. He lunged toward Maya, not to attack, but to wedge his massive body between her and the glass. He let out a vibration, not a growl, but a deep, tectonic hum that she felt in her own chest. "What is it, boy?" Maya whispered, her hand moving instinctively toward her hip. The glass door shattered. It wasn't a rock, it was a high-velocity projectile. The sound was a sharp crack that sent Elias diving behind the reception desk. Maya didn't wait. She grabbed Shadow's harness and hauled him toward the hallway leading to the kennels. "Elias, get to the panic room, now!" she screamed over the sudden blare of the security alarm. "Maya, what's happening?" Elias yelled, his face pale as he scrambled away. "The past is happening," Maya shouted back. She slammed the heavy steel door of the kennel wing shut, her breath coming in jagged gasps. Shadow was standing beside her, his fur standing on end, his eyes scanning the secondary exits. He wasn't panicked, he was tactical. "You weren't just a stray, were you?" Maya looked at him, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "You're K9. You're the dog from the Miller case, the one they said was put down after the warehouse explosion." Shadow let out a sharp, affirmative bark. He moved to the back door of the wing, pawing at a heavy equipment locker. "You want me to open it?" Maya moved quickly, her fingers fumbling with the latch. Inside weren't just cleaning supplies. There was a rusted metal box with a Department of Justice seal. "How did this get here?" Maya gasped. She ripped it open. Inside was a ruggedized hard drive, and a blood-stained tactical vest. This is Miller's evidence. The data that vanished when the safe house blew up. They didn't kill you, Shadow. They hid you here, and they've been waiting for someone to lead them to you. The sound of heavy boots echoed from the lobby. Thud, 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 professional, synchronized. They're inside, Maya whispered. She looked at the drive, then at the dog. If we stay here, we're cornered. Shadow, is there a way out through the back? The dog didn't waste time. He sprinted toward a narrow laundry chute meant for soiled bedding. He looked at Maya, then nudged a pile of blankets toward the opening. You've got to be kidding me, Maya muttered. It's a 20-foot drop into the basement. A voice boomed from the other side of the steel door. Agent Sterling, we know you're in there. Hand over the dog and the asset, and maybe you'll make it back to D.C. in one piece. Don't make this a recovery mission. Not happening, Miller, Maya yelled back, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. She grabbed the hard drive and shoved it into her inner pocket. You want the dog? You've got to come through me. She grabbed a heavy industrial fire extinguisher from the wall and wedged it into the door handle. It wouldn't hold forever, but it would give them seconds. She turned to Shadow. Go! Down! The dog vanished into the chute without a moment's hesitation. Maya followed, feet first, the darkness swallowing her as she slid down the metal tunnel. She hit a pile of laundry with a thud that knocked the wind out of her. Shadow was already on his feet, his nose pressed against the basement's exterior door. Good boy, Maya wheezed, pushing herself up. We need to get to my car. It's got the long-range comms. They burst out into the freezing air. The SUV was circling around. Maya keyed her remote, the lights of her ruggedized truck flashing. Get in! Move! Shadow leaped into the passenger seat as Maya dived behind the wheel. She slammed it into reverse, tires screaming against the ice. Bullets stitched a line across her hood, sparks flying in the dim light. Why didn't you leave with the others, Shadow? Maya asked. Her hands white-knuckled on the wheel as she drifted the truck around a snowbank. You could have gone home with a dozen families. Why wait for me? Shadow looked at her, his eyes reflecting the dashboard lights. He nudged a small, hidden compartment in the glove box, a compartment Maya hadn't even known existed. She flipped it open. Inside was a photo of a man in a Navy SEAL uniform. Her brother. Maya's heart stopped. You were his dog. You were Liam's partner. The dog let out a low, mournful whine. He told me you died with him, Maya whispered, her voice breaking. They told me everyone died in that breach. The SUV rammed them from behind, a jarring impact that sent the truck skidding toward the edge of the mountain road. Maya fought the wheel, her eyes blurry with tears she couldn't afford to shed. They lied about everything, didn't they? She growled, her grief turning into a cold, hard rage. They used Liam. They used you. And now they're trying to use me. The SUV pulled alongside, the window rolling down. A man with a scarred face leveled a suppressed rifle. Shadow! Duck! Maya screamed, slamming on the brakes. The SUV overshot them, and Maya didn't hesitate. She rammed the back of the heavier vehicle, sending it spinning into a snowdrift. She didn't stop to check for survivors. She floored it, heading deeper into the pines. We aren't going to the local police, Maya said, her voice dropping into a deadly professional tone. They're probably on the payroll. We're going to the one place Liam told me to go if the world ever went dark. Shadow barked once, a sound of pure, unyielding loyalty. "The high ground," Maya said. But as they climbed the steep mountain pass, the truck's engine began to sputter. A red light flickered on the dash. Fuel line hit. "No, no, no, not now!" Maya slammed her hand against the steering wheel. The truck gave one final cough and died, coasting into a shallow ditch miles from any shelter. The silence of the forest rushed in, heavy and suffocating. Maya looked at the fuel gauge, then at the darkness behind them. The headlights of a second vehicle appeared in the distance, crawling up the mountain like the eyes of a predator. "We have to walk," Maya said, grabbing her gear. "Shadow, can you track in this?" The dog jumped out of the truck, his nose already to the wind. He didn't head for the road. He headed for the steepest, most treacherous part of the ridge. "Wait, that's a dead end," Maya called out. Shadow stopped and looked back at her. He gave a low, urgent bark and nudged a pile of leaves near a hollowed-out log. Maya walked over, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. It wasn't a dead end. Hidden beneath the leaves was a heavy iron hatch, an old Cold War bunker entrance. "Liam's fallback point," Maya whispered, her breath hitching. "He told me about this when we were kids. He said the dog would know the way if he couldn't." She reached for the handle, but Shadow suddenly growled, his hackles rising. He didn't look at the hatch. He looked at the trees behind them. "Maya Sterling." A voice drifted through the pines, smooth and chillingly familiar. "You always were the smart one, but Liam was the one who knew when to surrender." Maya turned, her gun raised. Standing in the clearing was a man she had trusted for a decade, her mentor, Deputy Director Vaughn. "You?" Maya's voice was a whisper of pure betrayal. "You sent them to the shelter." "I sent them to retrieve what belongs to the Bureau," Vaughn said, stepping into the light. He wasn't alone. 6 men in tactical gear emerged from the shadows, their lasers painting red dots across Maya's chest. "The dog, the drive, and you, Maya. It's time to come home." Shadow stepped in front of Maya, his body a shield of muscle and teeth. He wasn't just refusing to leave. He was declaring a war that Maya was finally ready to fight. "I am home, Vaughn," Maya said, her finger tightening on the trigger. "And you're trespassing." Vaughn's voice was a cold blade cutting through the freezing air. But Maya didn't flinch. She gripped her weapon, feeling the vibration of Shadow's low growl against her legs. "You're stepping into a grave you dug yourself, Vaughn," she shouted, her voice echoing off the frost-covered pines. This betrayal tasted like ash, a reminder that the mentors she trusted were merely gatekeepers for a deeper rot. "Liam was weak, Maya. He chose a dog over his duty," Vaughn said, his boots crunching on the frozen gravel as he closed the distance. "He didn't choose a dog! He chose the truth!" Maya roared. She didn't wait. She fired a suppressive burst and dived for the iron hatch. Shadow lunged forward, his massive frame slamming into the rusted handle like a battering ram. The metal groaned but held. "Shadow, back up." She kicked the lock with a bone-jarring thud as bullets sparked off the iron inches from her face. "Open, damn it!" She clawed at the frozen seal, her fingers raw and bleeding. The hatch finally gave way with a sickening crack. She shoved Shadow into the darkness and tumbled in after him. They hit the concrete floor just as a grenade detonated above. The bunker shuddered, dust raining down, but the iron held. Maya slumped against the wall, her heart hammering. "We're trapped, boy. This is either Liam's fortress or our tomb." Shadow didn't whine. He began to pace, his nose pressed to the floor. He stopped at a small wooden crate marked with Liam's initials. Inside, hidden beneath an old blanket, was a secondary keypad. "A bypass?" Maya whispered. She tried every code until she hit the one Liam never forgot. His K9 call sign. The wall slid open. They entered a room filled with flickering monitors. Liam hadn't just been hiding. He was a one-man intelligence agency. The screens showed Vaughn's mercenaries setting up a thermal lance at the hatch. Suddenly, a recorded video of Liam appeared. "Maya, if you're here, Shadow led you. Vaughn is selling out every undercover agent. Shadow is the only witness who can't be bought. We have to broadcast this." Maya lunged for the terminal, but the line was dead. They cut the cables. "Shadow, the surface antenna is the only way." She looked at the dog, then at the glowing red metal of the breach above. They scrambled through a narrow ventilation duct, emerging onto a snowy ledge 50 feet above the mercenaries. Maya reached the antenna, but the wires were severed by the storm. A shadow fell over her. Vaughn stood there, his pistol leveled. "Resourceful, Maya, but you're out of options." "Not yet!" Maya snapped. Shadow lunged, locking onto Vaughn's arm. As they struggled, Maya grabbed the broken wires. She became the bridge, letting the high-voltage current surge through her body to finish the connection. On the screens below and across the regional network, Liam's confession went live. Vaughn stared at his tablet in horror. He had lost. He kicked Shadow away and lunged at Maya with a knife. But a secondary gas explosion rocked the peak. The ledge crumbled. Vaughn vanished into the abyss without a sound. Maya collapsed into the snow, her vision fading as the rhythmic thumping of rescue helicopters approached. Shadow stood over her, teeth bared at the repelling agents, refusing to let anyone touch her until he was sure they were safe. Justice had finally found its voice. Here is a tighter, faster-paced version of Part 3 in English, optimized for dramatic YouTube narration. Part 3, The Bloodline Legacy. The roar of rescue rotors drowned out the wind, but Maya's world had shrunk to the rhythmic, labored breathing of the dog at her side. Miller, the internal affairs lead, stayed back. He knew better than to challenge a K9 in a defensive stance. "Stand down, Shadow. He's a friend," Maya rasped. Shadow didn't move, as he let out a low rumble that vibrated through the frozen ground. He wasn't trusting anyone with a badge until they proved they weren't like Vaughn. "The broadcast hit DC, Maya! Liam won!" Miller yelled over the engines. "Now let us save you!" As medics approached, Shadow shifted with them, his eyes tracking every hand. When they lifted Maya onto the litter, the dog's composure broke. He let out a panicked bark, trying to leap into the helicopter before it was secure. "He stays with me," Maya gasped, grabbing Miller's sleeve. "If he's not on this bird, I'm not leaving." Miller didn't hesitate. "Load the dog, now." The flight was a blur of smelling salts and the copper tang of blood. Maya's hand stayed buried in Shadow's fur. Every time a medic moved, the dog's head popped up, a silent guardian. "He's not just protecting you," the medic whispered. "He's terrified of losing you." Maya realized then that Shadow hadn't just been waiting for a home. He had been waiting for a reason to live. At the hospital, staff tried to block Shadow at the surgical doors. "No animals!" a supervisor shouted. Shadow didn't growl. He simply sat, leaning his full weight against the glass, eyes locked on Maya's retreating gurney. "Let him stay," Miller's voice boomed. "That dog just took down a traitor. He stays where he wants." Hours later, Maya woke to a warm chin resting on her mattress. Shadow let out a heavy sigh. the first sign of peace. Miller entered, carrying a weathered leather box salvaged from the bunker. Inside were silver dog tags and a note from Liam. "Maya, Shadow found you. He knows where the rest is buried." "The rest?" Maya asked. Miller whispered. "Vaughn had offshore accounts, physical assets. We think the dog knows the locations." Suddenly, the news on the wall showed a live feed of the shelter. It was surrounded by the same black SUVs from the mountain. "They aren't looking for the drive, Miller," Maya said, her blood turning to ice. "Shadow wasn't just waiting for me. He was guarding the kennel next to him. There was a pup in the infirmary. His pup." Shadow let out an urgent whine, scratching at the linoleum. He wasn't asking for a walk. He was telling her the mission wasn't over. "Get me my boots," Maya commanded, swinging her legs over the bed despite the searing pain. "That dog didn't leave me, and I'm not leaving his bloodline." They reached the shelter as smoke began to billow into the sky. The bastards were burning it down. Chahima, Shadow, leaped through the car window before it stopped, a streak of fury heading for the flames. Maya burst through the front doors, the heat singeing her skin. She found Shadow barking desperately at a steel kennel door. Inside, a tiny German Shepherd pup huddled in terror. "I've got you!" Maya slammed her shoulder into the hot metal. A shadow moved in the smoke. "You should have stayed in the hospital, Sterling," a voice sneered. It was Elias, the shelter manager, holding a silenced pistol. "That pup is the key to $10 million, and you just delivered him to me." He leveled the gun. Shadow saw the trigger finger twitch. In a final, selfless act of love, the dog threw his body over Maya. The thud of the bullet was followed by a wet impact that sent them both sprawling into the fire. Shadow let out a cry of sacrifice, a sound of pure love that changed Maya's world forever. The bullet striking Shadow didn't just bring the dog down, it shattered Maya's last shred of restraint. "Shadow, no!" Her scream was a raw, jagged sound of agony echoing through the burning infirmary. She didn't cry. She rolled through the soot, drawing her backup weapon from her ankle holster with the lethal precision of a woman with nothing left to lose. Elias was frantically trying to clear his jammed pistol, his eyes wide with terror. "You picked the wrong day, Elias!" Maya roared, firing 3 rounds in a tight, deadly group. The shelter manager was thrown back into a wall of flaming supplies, dead before he hit the floor. Maya scrambled to Shadow, her hands trembling as she pressed into his blood-soaked fur. "Stay with me, boy. Don't you dare leave." Shadow's breathing was shallow and wet, but his eyes weren't on his wound. He was staring at the steel cage where the pup whimpered. "I've got him, Shadow. I promise." Maya reached in, grabbing the small, shivering ball of fur and tucking it inside her tactical jacket, feeling its frantic heart beat against her own. "Agent Sterling, the roof is buckling." Miller's voice boomed from the doorway. Maya grit her teeth, her voice cracking. "I'm not leaving him. Help me." Miller cursed but lunged forward. Together, they dragged Shadow's 90-pound frame out the front doors just as the ceiling collapsed in a roar of fire. The freezing mountain air hit them like a physical blow. As medics swarmed Shadow, Miller handed Maya Elias's phone. A message had just flashed on the screen. "Asset is secondary. Eliminate the dog and the girl. Zurich Vault is being accessed. V." Maya's blood turned to ice. "V! Vaughn is dead, Miller. I saw him fall." "Then who the hell is V?" Miller whispered. Suddenly, the pup in Maya's arms began to growl, a sound far too mature and menacing for its size. It wasn't looking at the fire. It was staring at the back of the emergency van. The medic treating Shadow suddenly slammed the doors shut. He wasn't a doctor. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing. The van screeched, tires spinning in the snow before tearing down the mountain road. "Stop that van!" Maya screamed, but it was armored. The chase was a high-speed nightmare through lethal mountain passes. Maya realized the truth. He's heading for the private airfield. Miller, Shadow isn't just a dog. Liam used Shadow's unique biological signature, his vocal frequency, as the master key to the offshore vaults. If Shadow dies, the key is gone. They reached the runway just as a private jet began to taxi. A man in an expensive suit stepped onto the stairs, holding a remote detonator. "Stay back, Sterling. One more step and the dog's crate explodes." He smiled coldly and pressed a button. A high-pitched digital hum erupted. Shadow howled in digital agony, and the pup in Maya's arms mirrored the scream. They were biological transmitters. "Goodbye, Agent Sterling." The man kicked Maya back and grabbed the pup by its neck, stepping onto the moving plane. "Give Liam my regards." The jet lifted off, leaving Maya bloodied and broken on the tarmac. She collapsed, but beneath her hand lay a silver dog tag the man had dropped. It didn't belong to Liam or Shadow. It was engraved with her own name, Maya Sterling. On the back, a single word was freshly etched: "Begin." Maya gasped as the realization hit her like a lightning bolt. This wasn't the end of a rescue. It was the start of a global conspiracy. She stood up, her eyes burning with a vengeful fire. The hunt was no longer local. It was worldwide. The silver dog tag in Maya's hand felt like a shard of ice, but the fire in her eyes was hot enough to melt the snow around her. She didn't look at the sky where the jet had vanished. She looked at Miller, who was scrambling to coordinate a global intercept with a frantic hand on his radio. "They're heading for international waters, Maya. We can't stop that bird once it clears the coast," Miller yelled, his voice cracking under the weight of the failure. Maya didn't answer. She stood up, her wounded shoulder screaming in protest, and gripped the tag until her knuckles turned white. "They aren't going to international waters, Miller," she said, her voice a low, terrifying calm. Vaughn wasn't the leader, and V doesn't stand for a name. It stands for a location. The Zurich Vault was a diversion. Liam's notes, the ones I thought were coordinates, they were an anagram. Miller stopped talking into his radio, staring at her as if she'd lost her mind. "An anagram for what?" Maya's gaze turned toward the dark silhouette of the nearby mountain peak. VALIS, the Valise Research Facility. It's less than 20 miles from here, buried under the old silver mine. The jet isn't leaving the state. It's circling back to land at the mountain's private plateau. They need the pup and Shadow there to finalize the biometric transfer before the DOJ can lock the accounts. Suddenly, a low, distorted hum vibrated from the dog tag in her palm. It wasn't just a tag, it was a short-range receiver. Shadow's voice, a digitalized, pained howl, erupted from the tiny speaker. The dog was alive, and he was being used to trigger the facility's locks. "Shadow, hold on!" Maya screamed at the piece of metal, her heart shattering at the sound of his agony. She didn't wait for Miller's tactical team. She dove into the driver's seat of the nearest running SUV, slamming it into gear. "Miller, get the strike team to the Vallis entrance. I'm going through the ventilation shaft." The drive was a blur of adrenaline and high-speed turns on black ice. Every few seconds, Shadow's whimpers echoed from the tag. a GPS pulse guiding her closer to the mountain's heart. He's refusing to bark the final sequence, Maya realized, her teeth gritting so hard they ached. He knows it'll kill him once the transfer is complete. He's fighting them from the inside. She reached the old mine entrance, the gate already blown off its hinges. She didn't slow down, ramming the SUV through the debris until the tunnels became too narrow. She leapt out, grabbing a tactical shotgun and a belt of grenades from the trunk. "Maya, wait for backup!" Miller's voice crackled over her earpiece. "There is no time for backup," Maya roared, sprinting into the darkness. She found the ventilation grate Shadow had used in the bunker, but this one was reinforced with steel. She didn't look for a key. She planted a breach charge, the explosion deafening in the confined space, and plunged into the smoke. She emerged into a high-tech laboratory that looked like a temple of cold, clinical cruelty. In the center of the room, Shadow was strapped into a vertical harness. Wires snaked into his fur, his eyes glazed with exhaustion. Beside him, in a smaller glass enclosure, the pup was shivering, a needle hovering over its neck. Standing between them was a woman Maya had seen 1,000 times in the news. The director of the FBI's biotech division, Dr. Iris Thorne. "You're persistent, Maya. I'll give you that," Thorne said, her voice devoid of emotion as she held a tablet. "But you're too late. Shadow is the lock, but the pup is the key. The biological inheritance is complete. I don't need the adult anymore." She moved her thumb toward a purge button on the screen. "Touch that button, and I'll put a slug through your heart before you can blink." Maya leveled the shotgun, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "If you shoot me, the pup dies instantly," Thorne countered, her eyes cold and calculating. "The enclosure is pressurized with nitrogen. Drop the weapon, Maya. You can't save both." Maya looked at Shadow. The dog's eyes cleared for a split second. He didn't look at Thorne. He looked at the overhead fire suppression pipes. He gave a single weak huff, a tactical signal Liam had taught him for structural weakness. Maya's mind raced. If she hit the pipes, the liquid nitrogen would flash freeze the room, but it might also kill everyone inside. "Shadow, no. You'll go with them," Maya whispered. Shadow barked, a loud, defiant, and final command. He was telling her to do it, and he was choosing her life and the pup's future over his own. "Maya, don't listen to him!" Thorne screamed, sensing the shift in the room. "He's not a dog, Thorne. He's a soldier," Maya said, her finger tightening on the trigger. "And soldiers don't negotiate with monsters." Maya fired, not at Thorne, but at the main valve above the laboratory. The pipe exploded, a cloud of sub-zero mist filling the room. Thorne screamed as the gas hit her, her tablet shattering on the floor. Maya dove for the pup's enclosure, shielding it with her own body as the glass frosted over. She felt the searing cold biting into her skin, her lungs burning, but she didn't stop. She kicked the enclosure open, grabbing the pup and tucking it into her thermal vest. "Shadow!" Maya lunged for the harness, her fingers freezing to the metal. She frantically ripped the wires out, her heart stopping when she saw Shadow's chest wasn't moving. "No, no, no! Breathe, Shadow! That's an order!" She pounded on his ribs, ignoring the ice forming on her eyelashes. Suddenly, a hand grabbed Maya's hair, pulling her back. Thorne was still alive, her face blackened by frostbite, a jagged piece of glass in her hand. "If I lose the money, you lose the dog!" she hissed. Maya didn't even use her gun. Bashi spun around, catching Thorne's wrist and snapping it with a sickening pop. She delivered a brutal headbutt that sent the doctor sprawling into the freezing mist. "You've already lost, Thorn." Liam made sure of it. Maya turned back to Shadow. She pressed her face against his muzzle, her tears freezing on his fur. "Please, don't leave me alone." A tiny, high-pitched bark erupted from Maya's vest. The pup crawled out, its small nose pressing against Shadow's ear. It let out a soft, rhythmic whine, a biological frequency Liam had hidden in the pup's DNA as a reset code. Shadow's body jolted. His lungs expanded with a sharp, gasping breath. His eyes snapped open, looking directly into Maya's. "You're alive," Maya sobbed, pulling the massive dog's head into her lap. "You're both alive." The lab doors burst open as Miller and the strike team flooded in, their tactical lights cutting through the fog. "Secure the director! Get a vet team in here now!" Miller shouted, his voice full of relief. He walked over to Maya, looking at the woman, the dog, and the pup huddled together on the floor. "The accounts are locked, Maya. The legacy is safe. It's over." Maya stood up, her legs shaking, but her spirit unbroken. She draped her jacket over Shadow, who was now standing on 3 legs, leaning heavily against her. The pup sat between his front paws, looking up at them with bright, curious eyes. Maya looked at the silver dog tag she still held, the one that had guided her through the darkness. She realized then that Liam hadn't just left her a mission. He had left her a family that couldn't be broken by bullets, fire, or greed. As they walked out of the mountain facility and into the first light of a clear Montana morning, the air was crisp and pure. Maya didn't look back at the ruin they'd left behind. She looked at the road ahead, where a new life was waiting for all of them. Shadow stopped at the edge of the plateau, looking out over the valley he had guarded for so long. He let out a long, hot and powerful bark that echoed through the canyons, a signal to the world that he was no longer a prisoner and no longer alone. Maya rested her hand on his head, the pup leaning against her ankle, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like peace. She knew the shadows of the past would always be there, but they no longer had the power to haunt her. She was Maya Sterling. She was an FBI agent, and she was the guardian of a bond that transcended everything. True loyalty is not a choice you make once, but a promise you keep every time the world asks you to walk away.